Oh, I do apologize. I have been going on and just only realized that my microphone was muted. Thank you for that, for calling my attention to it. So I can see one of our guests still waiting in the wings. I have to start all over again, because this is a very, very important article that allows us to understand exactly what the situation is, how the Niger situation started, and where we're at. So I do apologize. Thank you for calling my attention to it. Let's go back to the very beginning of this article. It's a long one, but it will allow us to understand what's happening. So the title is How the US Fumbled Niger's Coup and Gave Russia an Opening. A week of missteps and communication breakdowns pushed an important American ally towards the Kremlin. Niger's president hid behind the bulletproof door of his official residence and talked over a phone he assumed was monitored. To anxious French and American allies, he repeated assurances that the army would soon rescue him from an unfolding coup. Outside the ground floor room, Mohamed Bazoum had recently renovated to protect himself from such an event. See, what I don't understand is you are a leader, a democratically elected leader, supposedly, but you had to build a fortress to protect yourself. So you see where these are all red flags as to how these sort of leaders come about. Because if the people put you there, you would not need to build a fortress to protect yourself from your own people. Okay, so mutineers from his presidential guard fanned out across the presidency compound, furious about a proposal to replace their long-standing commander. According to Nigerian, US, and European officials hunkered over the phone beside his wife and son. Bazoum delicately encouraged advisors to send the army's regular units. At around noon, his cell phone rang with a call from the former US ambassador who was about to board a flight to his vacation. The ambassador was worried one of Washington's closest allies in Africa could become the latest in a string of regional states to fall into the hands of coup leaders sympathetic to Russia. Everything is fine, the imprisoned president carefully intoned. A week later, Bazoum is still imprisoned in his palace. Junta leaders are seeking aid from Vladimir Putin's regional partners, and America is on the verge of losing its most important ally in a crucial and unstable part of Africa. An obscure personal dispute within Niger's presidential guard has now become what appears to be a geopolitical win for Russia and its Wagner Group, a paramilitary company, in the bid to flip Western allies. The situation could yet turn into an open military conflict. 11 West African countries, led by Nigeria, have threatened to use force to restore Bazoum to power if the coup isn't reversed by Sunday. And I believe it's today, Sunday. In return, the pro Russian leaders of Mali, Burkina Faso have vowed to defend Niger. Officials in the US and Europe are scrambling for ways to return Bazoum to power, but concede the window is closing. The Kremlin on Friday warned against any intervention Russia had warned. The coup, if successful, could lead Russia to pick up some of America's most, um, could lead to Russia to pick up some of America's most important drone bases used to fly missions across the Sahara between Libya and Nigeria. The Wagner's mercenaries have previously taken over former US and French outposts in Syria and Mali. Keep following me. This outcome wasn't predestined, okay? So it wasn't something that was so expected to happen. A week of missteps and communications breakdowns pushed the vast nation of Niger toward Russia. Nigerian, American, European, and other West African security officials, as well as Nigerian soldiers described a series of unexpected blunders that now threatens to turn West Africa into a theater of regional war. Washington, caught without any key personnel in its Africa posts, failed to anticipate what is now the seventh coup in the region since 2020, not including a failed attempt in Niger 2 years ago. While Bazoum sat in his safe room calling for help, America and its allies struggled to react as the conflict escalated into threats of war between Russia backed countries and West Africa's biggest military, Nigeria. The US has spent more than $500 million arming and equipping Niger's military. Now, they're not going to spend $500 million building roads, hospitals, um, schools to educate our people, but they will arm the military, train them so that they can become a tool. Yet the country's special forces, trained for nearly every counterterrorism eventuality, had no answer for Sunday's coup. West Africa's most enduring security threat, the forces were left chatting over WhatsApp groups over whether to intervene. The US and Europe have made Niger the centerpiece of their fight against the spread of Islamic State and Al Qaeda in Africa's Sahel, a 3,000-mile semi arid territory on the southern shore of the Sahara that also includes Burkina Faso, Mali, and Chad. They are some of the world's poorest and fastest growing population. That's what they call the Nigerians. Poorest, fastest. But these are the people who export the most uranium, okay, to the US and to Europe. They are some of the world's, poorest and fastest growing population in failing states. Nearly half of Niger's budget comes from foreign aid. And you might want to ask why. This is your strong ally, your reliable ally. You have invested a lot, and then there is a coup without any reason, said Kiari Liman Tinguiri, Niger's ambassador to Washington, who was fired by the junta overnight. It's very nice to be friends of the West, but it may not be helpful when hard times come. They don't seem to learn a lesson. They don't. The United States and the US states and White House officials have said they still think there's a narrow opportunity for a peaceful resolution that would retain Niger's democracy. And you might want to ask yourself, is there truly democracy in any African country? While we are giving diplomacy a chance and have ongoing diplomatic engagement at the highest levels, we are continuing to review all options around our cooperations with the Nigerian government, a spokeswoman for the White House National Security Council said. Our focus is to help the people of Niger preserve their hard earned democracy. What hard earned democracy are you talking about, if I may ask? And the next paragraph says the coup began with an idea for a personnel change, mulled over months by Bazoum and his aides to replace the leader of the Presidential Guard that held watch over the country's 63-year-old commander in chief. US and French intelligence officers had long known about the president's plan to reshuffle his security detail and the risk it entailed. The Presidential Guard felt marginalized after vast sums of military assistance poured into the country's counterterrorism units. Two people familiar with the situation said the French intelligence service, DGSC, warned Paris of the risk, but neither France nor the US took significant actions to defend their ally in Niamey. According to French and West African intelligence officials, Bazoum, elected in 2021 in Niger's first democratic transfer of power, had been feted in Washington as a reliable partner against the twin threat of jihadist attacks and Russia's growing influence. In sonorous French, the former interior and foreign minister would hit some of Washington's favorite notes. He rattled off gender inequality, statistics at event hosted by the State Department and Gates Foundation, and regaled audiences with his efforts to educate girls in a country whose birthright is the world's highest at 7 children for every woman. You see, they always come up with all these stories of gender inequality. We used to be hailing them when we hear things about this. We didn't realize that's all boulder dash because it doesn't concern them what happens in Africa or any country for that matter in Africa. Okay? These are only excuses they use when they're not happy with the leadership. Okay? After coup leaders in neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso shifted towards Russia, Bazoum made clear he stood with America. Niger registered just 114 attacks from jihadist groups last year, while Burkina Faso and Mali combined registered some 2,000. According to the data collected by the non-profit Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project and analyzed by the Pentagon-funded Africa Center for Strategic Studies, more bases, we don't need them. He said in an interview with the Wall Street Journal shortly after he was elected. That's Bazoum, Niger's president. Some of Niger's military leaders saw him as an interloper with an Arab background. Niger's majority Hausa ethnic group predominates the military. In April, Bazoum replaced the army chief of staff and the head of national, this is a French word, gendarmerie, hoping to place more trusted officers in their ranks, according to European and West African security officials. That stirred suspicion within his presidential guard. On July the 24th, Bazoum directed an aide to draft a decree to dismiss the guard's leader. Are you still with me, guys? It's an interesting read. I see my guests are here. I'm going to be bringing them up shortly. Okay, let me introduce one after the other and we continue taking our reads, okay? Who's ready to come on? Let's see. Pigeon Odimwegu, are you ready? Okay, when I see the cameras are on, I'll bring them on. Oh, you're having a problem with your video? Okay, you can continue to sort that out whilst I continue with this read. Okay? So guys, come along with me. Do not tire. Do not tire yet. This is the reason why they say that if you want to hide something from an African, you put it in a book. But we're not those kind of Africans. We read. Job Lazarus Okelo, welcome. So I'm going to quickly see as much as I can take from that article, and then we'll carry on with our conversation in earnest. Okay. So General Omar Tichani had protected Niger's leaders for 12 years with a unit of some 700 elite soldiers backed by armored cars. Tichani's unit had stopped a coup attempt against Bazoum days ahead of his inauguration. As Bazoum built up the country's counterterrorism forces, Tichani's guard lost out on resources and stature. The president had been weighing for months whether to fire the 57-year-old general, according to people familiar with the matter. At 3 a.m. on July the 26th, the general's men drove up to the presidential palace, a white stucco arabesque estate overlooking the Niger River. Inside, gazelles and goats slept in the manicured gardens. Animals Bazoum and his wife brought with them when he took office in 2021. Tichani's men, carrying heavy weaponry, Disarmed security officers equipped only with handguns and walked past the presidential garden to Bazoum's residence. Bazoum fled into the safe room across the hall from his office and phoned aides to say he was confident the US trained elements of his army would rally to his rescue. In a twist, some of the best US trained special forces among Niger's regular army units were on counterterrorism missions in the distant desert regions of a country twice the size of Texas with few roads. The lightly armed units in position to assault the palace, and the chain of command broke down. Rank and file soldiers said they debated over WhatsApp groups what to do. They received no formal instructions from their commanders, who appeared to be waiting to see which faction had the momentum. So it really did depend on which of the factions had the upper hand, all right, to decide whether it was going to be a successful coup or not. Bazoum, who still had full control in his communications, in the safe room, phoned international allies. This is where it gets really interesting. Okay, listen. International allies and ambassadors in Niger's embassies in the West. He stressed over the phone and video calls that the coup had no basis. It was a personnel dispute and could easily be reversed. His US envoy rushed to let the State Department know what was happening, though the US had spent hundreds of millions of dollars transforming Niger into its top military outpost in the Sahara. It didn't have an ambassador in the country. The Biden administration didn't formally nominate one until 8 months after the previous ambassador left, only to face opposition from Senator Rand Paul, who has put holds on State Department appointees until the White House releases intelligence he believes could show COVID-19 leaked from a Chinese lab. Okay. Washington also has no ambassador at the African Union or in neighboring Nigeria, or anybody in a special envoy post that it had created to deal with the region's deterioration. The relevant Africa desk at the National Security Council was in flux, held by a short-term temporary post that was due to hand off to another temporary caretaker within days. This is extremely frustrating. This was not a widely supported coup. It was one unit that had its grievance for years and should have done more to act, said J. Peter Pham, former US Special Envoy to the Sahel under President Trump. In the early hours, he added, his exfiltration could have been organized relatively easily. The golden hour has passed. This is where the US had begun to lose hope of saving their ally. Okay, we're still carrying on. We're still carrying on with the read. Are you guys ready to come on? And you have to turn on your video, Odimwegu. You have to turn on your video, okay? Let me see who's here. I'll bring you guys on and I'll continue taking the read. Maria? Maria, can you turn on your camera, please? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Maria?
Yes.
Please turn on your camera. I'm going to bring you back up once you turn on your camera. Let me see. Where is Odimwego? Let me see. Sayel, let me bring you up. Can you turn on your camera, please? What's happening with all of your cameras? Can you turn on your cameras, please? Can you hear me? Mankuyo, can you hear me? All right, I think they need to sort themselves out whilst they try to do that, I'll continue with our story time. King George. Oh yeah, sorry about that. I finally sorted that out. Sorted it out. Lance Beamon, greetings from the US. Yes, greetings from the United Kingdom. Yes, so let's carry on with our read, which is painting a picture for us to understand how the Nigerian problem came about. Okay, where was I? It says Bazoum contacted allies in France, which had about 1,500 troops in the country. A decision would have to come from President Emmanuel Macron, who was traveling in the South Pacific, 12 time zones ahead. France government declined to comment. Junta leaders headed to a state TV station and stood around a table where a stone faced spokesman said the military could no longer witness the gradual and inevitable demise of our country. If Bazoum was going to be freed, it would have to come from outside. Guns of August. Macron had just landed in South Pacific island of New Caledonia, when he spoke to his top defense and diplomatic officials who laid out options to free Bazoum. And I just wonder, this is Africa. This is Africa's problem. Why is France constantly carrying a headache that doesn't concern them if it's not because it only favors them what happens in Francophone Africa? Okay? It's interesting. A lot of people don't understand. Everybody frowns against military intervention. When your supposed democracy, you supposedly practice a democracy in your country. However, there is a slight twist to what's been happening in Francophone Africa, and a lot of people are not um, talking down, beating down, and negatively talking about these interventions by military coups in Africa. There is a reason for that. Okay, so let's carry on, and then when we start this conversation, we'll talk about all of that. Okay, if Bazoum was going to be freed, it would have to come from outside, they said. Okay, and Macron had just landed in South Pacific island of New Caledonia. Yeah, I've gone past that. So he said he spoke to his top defense diplomatic officials who laid out options to free Bazoum for years. The French president had been briefed on a growing protest movement against France in the cities of its former West African colonies. Young men jam packed into those cities had come to see France's military presence as an unwelcome imposition after years of Al Qaeda attacks. Viral social media posts and videos accuse the French army of pursuing ulterior aims on Africa's natural resources, which is no longer a secret. In Mali, then Burkina Faso, coup leaders seized power and justified their takeovers as an act of liberation from France before turning to Russia as their protector and benefactor. The French president ruled out sending a unilateral force to usher a democratically elected president to power, as France did in 2011 in Ivory Coast instead. He wanted to assist Nigerian armed forces that remained loyal to Bazoum, an option that vanished as the country's military command acquiesced to the coup. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in the South Pacific as well, warning the people of the island's country of Tonga. So Blinken was in Tonga, that China was practicing economic coercion. By the time he and Bazoum connected, the coup was complete. So America was doing what they normally do, go around and instead of just stating the truth of what the intentions are, let's have a mutual agreement to be in a relationship that is virtually mutually beneficial to both parties. They carry on telling tales of why somebody else is bad for me. Allow me to find out. I'm sophisticated enough in my brain to decipher who's good for me and who's not. It's about that time. Okay. By the time Bazoum connected, the coup was complete. Russia was in an excellent position to step into the vacuum. Vladimir Putin was already receiving African leaders invited to a Russia African summit in St. Petersburg due to start the following day. Bazoum had refused the invitation, but the Kremlin backed leaders of Mali and Burkina Faso, Assimi Goita and Ibrahim Traore, gathered for the meetings in the halls of Constantine Palace. As news of the coup trickled in, their intelligence chiefs met under Russian auspices to agree on a coordinated response. Officials in Mali and Burkina Faso didn't respond to requests for comment. In another room, Traore, the world's youngest head of government at 34 years old, told Putin that the people of his country supported Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That was a bold one. The question that my generation poses to itself, he says, if I can summarize it, is how can Africa, with so many resources under our soil, with such natural abundance of sun and water, still today remain the poorest continent? He told a St. Petersburg panel. We haven't had any answer until today, but now we have an opportunity to form new relations. The junta, which included recipients of US training and largesse, hadn't shown particular interest in pivoting toward Russia. The military itself led US counterparts know the military itself let US counterparts know they wanted to keep the American aid flowing, military officers said, but the Kremlin eyed an opportunity. What's his name? How did they say this Russian name? Yevgeny or Yevgeny Prigozhin, whose Wagner's mercenary whose Wagner mercenaries are protecting the leaders of Mali and Central Republic, offered to the help Niger, hailing their overthrow of a pro-American government. What happened in Niger is nothing other than the struggle of the people of Niger with their colonizers, he said in a voice mail message posted in a Telegram account. Protests organized by an opposition movement thronged France's embassy in Niger. Several in the crowd waved Russian flags. France sent military planes to evacuate its citizens. The US moved its 1,100 troops sent there to fight Islamist insurgents. Inside, American built drone and special forces bases, the State Department held off on calling the upheaval a coup, a designation that could, under the US law, sharply restricts America's ability to keep funding, training, and equipping Niger's military. The stakes were becoming more serious for the African giant to Niger's south. That's Nigeria. Nigeria was once the world's 33rd richest country per capita, until decades of military coups and misrule left it among the poorest. Its leaders feared a domino of coups would topple more civilian governments. And that is something that is more likely to happen than not. On Sunday, July the 30th, Nigeria's new president Bola Tinubu gathered with presidents and foreign ministers from 11 West African states, along with a representative from Bazoum's government in a glass panel building in the Nigerian capital of Abuja. Tinubu, who had risen to prominence campaigning against military rule in Nigeria, said that after coups in Mali and Burkina Faso, both supported by Russia as well as in Guinea and Chad, the one in Niger was the last straw. If they accepted the coup, more would come, after their meeting ended, the West African leaders issued an ultimatum. Tchiani had 1 week to return power to the democratically elected president or face the possible use of military force. This is Nigeria talking. Okay. And remember, Nigeria is not as powerful and as strong as they used to be in the days of ECOWAS and ECOWOG. All right? Nigeria is struggling on its own to contain Boko Haram. So, how in the name of God are they thinking to start one? Nigeria's military is unable to tackle even internal problems right now, other than just, cause mayhem for the ordinary people. So, how in the name of God is Bola Ahmed Tinubu thinking that he's going to start a war that is not his, literally fighting a war on behalf of France and the West? The State Department wasn't sure it backed the idea. Senior US officials said, but Washington also wanted to show support for the West African government. Blinken issued statements of general support for the Nigerian-led idea, the Nigerian-led idea. Nigerian, they are the same thing, just said in French and English differently. A Nigerian government spokesperson declined to comment. Is it Nigerian or Nigerian now? On Wednesday, Tchiani sent one of his junta leaders on a secret flight to Mali to meet with country's pro-Russian leader. Defense chiefs from the West African states that opposed the coup met in Nigeria. Deputy National Security Advisor Jonathan Finer flew to Abuja to meet Tinubu, Nigeria's president, who said the coup should not stand. Now we're coming to the concluding part of our read. I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. The Biden administration favored diplomacy but worried that the junta intended to force Nigeria to make good on its threat of military force. Concerns that came up in the meeting. Few in Washington felt confident Nigeria's military had the capacity to pull off an intervention, just like I imagined. They also had the same concern. But at this point, the US conceded there were few options left. On Thursday, the junta announced on state TV it had terminated military cooperation agreement with France. From his palace, Bazoum phoned his ambassador to the US to dictate an op that appeared in the Washington Post calling for international intervention. My country My country is under attack and I have been taken hostage, he said. In our hour of need, I call on the US government and the entire international community to help us restore our constitutional order. By the time it's published, parts of the country were in dark. Nigeria, which provides some 75% of Niger's electricity, had cut off one of its main transmission lines, plunging villages and towns into blackouts. The presidential residence lost power as well. Bazoum's phone remains charged, though. His aide said Friday if it goes out, the US could lose its ability to reach the president. I hope he has a lot of lithium batteries, one former official said. That was the read. A beautiful article put down by names that I've already mentioned. Thank you, Sahel. I can see you. I'm going to bring you up now. We're going to start our conversation in earnest. Again, this article was contributed by Vivian Salama and Naomi Bisebi. Okay, so let's carry on and bring our guest on. They're going to introduce themselves as they come up. These are Pan-Africanists. Good evening from London, Sahel. Please turn on your microphone and do well to introduce yourself whilst I get the other people on.
Yes, greetings, Susan West. Greetings from Kenya. I'm forwarding my fraternity greetings from Kenya. So, how is the London?
Very well. We're very happy with the weather today. Thank you for making it. I can see the other guests are probably struggling for some reason. I'm not sure. If they're able to come on, I will definitely bring them on, but we can carry on the conversation in earnest. Okay. Synovia Ridley, as always, very educational information. Absolutely. Thank you for joining, sis. And so I had a long read. I have two videos that I'm going to be playing as we carry on, just so that those Africans, especially continental Africans, who still have doubts of where to stand on issues concerning Africa, will better understand the mindset of the West as it concerns every African country on the continent. Okay? So, really quickly, Sahel, introduce yourself first, please.
Yeah, to Africa Rise TV followers and the people who are following us live, I know many of them are in Africa and as well as the rest of the part of the world. Greetings to you all. So this is Yelel Mankuyo. I'm based in Kenya. Many knows me as the Revolutionary Mankuyo. I'm also based in Kenya and also I'm a Kenyan. I'm in Kenya as we speak. So country in East Africa because I think everybody knows Kenya. Every Africa must know Kenya. It's only that the West who doesn't know Kenya. But for Africans, they must know Kenya.
Everyone knows Kenya. Even though, yes, everyone knows Kenya. Thank you. Kenya is not that insignificant not to know or not to remember, even for foreigners. Okay, so let's go ahead into the conversation whilst we're waiting for your other colleagues to come on.
Thank you.
What is, I'm not sure what part of the article I was reading you might have heard. However, what is your take on the happenings in West Africa as far as Niger is concerned?
Yes, thank you so much. To me, and also I'm talking as a Pan-Africanist and also a revolutionary. I'm also Susan West. You have not given me a time to introduce the organization of the movement that I belong from.
Yeah, so feel free to do so. You have the floor now.
I'm the chair of Communalism Movement of Africa, and as well as the member of the Continental Revolution Movement. So basically, let's go direct straight to the point, whereby the discussion of the day was about the coup. The coup.
Sorry, your audio is not so great. It comes in. So can you go closer to your microphone? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
We want to talk about the coup that has been happening in Africa, mostly in the Niger. So there's an article. I'm sorry that I was having a network problem, but now I'm in. So we have seen in Africa that there are a lot of coups that are happening in Africa, like in the Burkina Faso. Many coups have been happening. So for this case of Niger, we have experienced. I've just heard about the article that I was reading about when the president of I can say the president of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, if I'm not wrong, is called Bola Tinubu, complaining about the situation in Niger, taking some steps, even forcing to an extent of forcing ECOWAS to enter the war with Nigeria, with Niger. So to me, I think the President Tinubu, because I've read the article, when you're reading the article about the President Tinubu, another Africa head of state, like now in Kenya, I've also heard that they are complaining about the same. They are really not African, or they are not supporting the Africa agenda or Africa revolution. Because we know somebody has been in power, like the president of Niger, he has been in power. He has been in power for 10 years. Then he wants to subvert the constitution for his personal interest, for him to remain in power. Is that ridiculous? Really? Could that be? That is very ridiculous. Sorry. So for the people, for the military, for the people with uniform, the comrades in the uniform, to take their role, to say that enough is enough. This person is not here to save the interests of the black people. Is not here to save the black consciousness. Is there to save personal interests, but not the black people. So you elected somebody who is just who is supporting who is serving the interests of the France, but not the real interests of the people of Niger. We are seeing what is happening in Niger, the country with gold and uranium, but the people are languishing in poverty. The people are sleeping hungry. There are a lot of people who are sleeping in there. There are a lot of people who are sleeping in the street. But somebody is just saying that I want to remain in power for life. Who declared you as the president for life? It is you who want to declare yourself as the president for life, and as well as the West, because nobody has no, in the West we have not seen such kind of issues. But for Africa to go to dictate the West and how they should rule. But we have, in these cases, we have been always seeing the West saying that this president should remain in power in Africa, and this president should kill in Africa, because we have seen many presidents who have been killed in Africa. So basically, my point is that it is time for African revolution, and it seems like Africans are now rising, as we have been always saying that Africa rising. This is the rise for Africa. People are waking up. The struggle is now. We have seen that in West Africa, there are many people like the president of Burkina Faso. He has as well wake up. He has gone to the street. He has said that enough is enough. It is no longer 1950s, whereby the colonialism was in Africa. So the imperialism has still left Africa. We have seen as well as the Mali, they have said that they can no longer accept, they can no longer speak France as their language. So those are the things that I can see that now, to me, the revolution that is happening, because I cannot even call a military coup, but I term it as a revolution. I term it as a revolution, and it's a revolution that is that is sweet to our people. I can say that it is a revolution that favors our people, but it's not the revolution that we have been experiencing, whereby the West can help the puppet to oust the president who is in power, like whatever happened in Burkina Faso when the Blaise Compaoré ousted out the Thomas Sankara. Now we have seen that the president of now we have seen that it is no longer that, but it is the people who are picking it is the people who are ousting the puppets and go to the power and tell the world that Africa can stand for itself. Africa can manage its own resources. Africa can maintain its own culture. We are tired of LGBTQ. We are tired of the Western feminism. So I can say that it is the time for awakening, and I really support the coups that are happening in the northern part of the continent.
For some people, they will argue that is there no other way that Africa can find her footing without a military intervention? So what ideas do you have without a military because you're heralding, you're happy about the military coups. Well, could that have been the best option or way forward for Africa?
Yeah, I think. Can you repeat again?
You're happy from what you've said. You're happy with the coups happening. My question is, some other people will argue that it's not the best way for Africa to get herself out of the mix with France, especially for Francophone countries. Could there have been any alternative, other ways to go about it other than a military intervention by way of coup d'etats?
Another way. There, there, there is another way, but I think there's another way that we can do intervention, but it has really failed. For example, I can use example. We have been always voting for democracy. We have been always saying democracy. We have been voting from Ghana was the first country in Africa to gain its independence by Kwame Nkrumah, when the Kwame Nkrumah was the president. So Ghana was the first country to gain its independence in 1957. So we have been voting from the 1957, see, from the first country in Africa to gain independence. But we are still crying. If voting could be a solution, then we could have been free, because we have been voting from 1967. So that is another alternative that people might think that it is a diplomatic way, but it is not a diplomatic way. How can you approach this puppet? If somebody can be in power for 30 years, we know the dictators, the looters, the murderers who has been in power for 30 years. We know them. They're in these countries. I can even mention them, but we are in the TV. I can't mention them, but the time will come that I will mention them. So basically, we have been seeing that we have seen them adding other. We have been seeing them adding and breaking the constitution or subverting the constitution of the presidential limit. The constitution, like now, the constitution allows somebody to run a president for only 10 years, 5 for first term and 5 other years for the second term. But now we have seen others saying that our period has not yet ended. We have to run for another election for another 5 years, another 10 years. That is 20 years. So I don't think that we have another solution to address this issue. But that is the revolution. As long as it's not a violent revolution whereby we destruct each other property, stealing each other property, or massive looting, that's what I can say generally. But as long as it's a revolution to remove the imperialism and neocolonialism in Africa, but to me, that is the only way to go. We don't have another solution. So to go with the military coup, for the military to come to intervene, apparently it means that the civilian are really suffering. There is no way that the military can come if the civilian are not suffering. So if you see the military, the civilian were on the side of the military. We have not seen the military, for example, in North Africa, the civilian who are protesting against the military. So it means that the people were attached with the puppet regimes. So that is the reason why we have even seen in the Burkina Faso, in the Mali, we have seen many people. There was a massive demonstration in the street whereby the people, the civilian, were accompanied with the military. So it seems like the people are as well tired. So coup is the only way to go.
Thank you for that. So, if ECOWAS, led by Nigeria, currently Nigeria's president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, if they indeed had the audacity, which is ill thoughts, if they indeed attacked Niger, what do you reckon will be the outcome? How would Niger be able to defend herself?
It's a suffering country. It's a suffering country whereby it has its own laws and the constitution. So for the President Tinubu, somebody we are not even sure. We don't have any surety how he was elected.
Mm-hmm.
Up to date, I know there is a massive protest in Nigeria. People are complaining about him. We have also had the high inflation in Nigeria, high cost of living, the price of the petroleum, the price of essential commodity. People cannot afford. But somebody is just jumping all around talking about the affairs of another state, another different states. So I think the comrade Tinubu is really doing the wrong thing. So he should really focus on the Nigeria issue. He should focus on the high cost of living. He should focus on the high taxation in Nigeria. So instead of going to another country whereby the country that has its own laws and sovereign powers, he did a very mistake. He should deal with Nigeria first. He should quell the riots in Nigeria. He should listen to the people of Nigeria, but not intervene into another sovereign state that has its own laws and its own constitution. So the comrade Tinubu is really absolutely wrong. So I disapprove with him. So I think on the issue of Niger, Niger should declare, and the people of Niger, I really stand with the people of Niger and the military of Niger, that any outside force that want to reinstate the president back or to bring the president back, the one who was hosted out, should be declared as the enemy of the progress and the enemy of the black people, enemy of the Ubuntu people, or the enemy of the Africa, the enemy of the Africa. So declaring, it means that this Tinubu knows this president, knows the person who was hosted by the military well. So why don't you want to protect the regime that was ruining the country, that was oppressing the masses, that was oppressing the black people? So Tinubu and other Africa presidents like Avada, as well as the president of William Ruto, as well, talking like the same, but they should, in fact, William Ruto has the same thing. Whatever is happening in Kenya, those are the only countries that have really failed Africa. Nigeria and Kenya. Those are the countries that are complaining about the coup in Niger. And those are the same country where the people are languishing in poverty. Those are the same country where the cost of living is very high. It is Nigeria and Kenya. But at the same time, they are talking about the national issue instead of focusing on what is happening in Kenya. People are dying. People are being shot in the street when they come out to protest in the streets. So basically, we should be very critical. We should be very critical and about this issue, because when the president just wake up and start commenting about the military coup, but he or she doesn't know the core point or the root of the coup. What caused the coup? What was the root of the coup? So I really say that Nigeria and other Africa countries like Kenya and as well as the Benin should leave Nigeria alone. That is the revolution that is happening in Nigeria, and the next day it will happen in Kenya.
Niger,
The following day it will
Niger,
happen in Nigeria,
Niger.
in
It's
Niger,
Niger.
Yeah, yeah,
Niger. Yeah.
yeah.
I was just telling you so that our listeners don't get confused. Yeah.
Yes,
So a lot of people have had these spaces, which is to say that how foolish it would be for Nigeria to go and invade a sovereign nation on behalf of Western countries and powers that mean no good for the rest of us as Africans. It's no longer a secret what France's modus operandi or operandi is on the continent, taking the resources of the countries, making the people borrow their own money off from France, the Bank of France, and paying back in high interest rates. And these people have woken up. These are your brothers on the continent have woken up and said, enough of this oppression. If you don't have the audacity and courage to stand up for yourself, and these people have been able, a smaller country compared to yours, population wise, have stood up to say enough is enough. And you will allow yourself, and you, I'm referring to Nigeria, led by President Tinubu, whose presidency is in doubt still. Okay, so how could you leave all of the myriads of problems that is facing Nigeria to go into Niger to start a war? A war by who? For who? Nigeria cannot even afford a war to start with. But if for any reason that the stupidity or the foolishness of the Nigerian government allows them to carry on to start a war with Niger, Nigeria stands to lose so much more than we can ever imagine. And of course, that is what the enemies will want, which is that we are fighting again. When there is no peace, there is not going to be progress. There is no peace, they find the loophole to keep taking our natural resources from the back door. Okay? Just before we carry on, let me play two videos. Even though the videos are lagging for some reason, they are very short videos, so we can manage and just listen to them no matter how they lag. Let's listen to this video. One is a video by Maitama Sule. Maitama Sule is an elder statesman, a Nigerian elder statesman, was. Okay, so you would listen to what he said, a professor or whoever it is said to him when Nigeria, I'm not going to go too much into it. Let me play that video. And then I will also play a video by a British journalist who talked about the highest the highest ranking officers and the medals given to them, and the meanings and the implications of those medals given to them, what they mean basically. So let me get the video of Mitama Sule. Once we get that, it's not a very long video, so please bear with me even if it's lagging.
And met this gentleman, a professor. This gentleman told him that he knew why we were out. We wanted to get support and sympathy for Nigeria and to explain the federal cause to the international community. international community. And he explained that the international community was not particularly interested in Nigeria as such. All that people were interested in were our resources. And he even for us to develop our economies, we wouldn't mind the whole lot of you being eliminated. But, he said, in the case of Nigeria, there is a difference.
This is worse than I thought it was going to be. I will not be able to play the full video, but in literal terms, well, not in literal terms, but in summary, what Metama Sule was talking about was the fact that he was told in 1957 or 1967 by this professor who said that if they only could get robots to take the resources under the soil of Nigeria, they don't care about the people. They don't care if they exterminated the people. They don't care. And he did mention the problem with Nigerians is that they don't only have the wealth of resources in their land, they also have the capacity and intelligence of people. They have the number of people. They have Nigerians are intelligent, so um, they pose even a more threats to the West. He said if they allowed for Nigeria, with the sort of resources they have and the intelligent people they have, to have 20 years of peace and stability, that Nigeria will become another Japan. And that's something the West does not want to see. So when you listen to things like this, as far back as 1957 or 1967, being said to an elder statesman at that time who must have been a very young man, expressing the thoughts and views of the Western powers and countries towards every African country. In this case, they mentioned Nigeria, but that is truly the thought they have for every single African country. Okay? So they know, but are we so foolish to understand what their game plan is and why the divide and rule system continues to be used and they're succeeding? Because if we do come to that place of understanding the power that we hold by ourselves, for ourselves, the resources under our feet, and decide to allow for peace to reign, do you know the amount of prosperity that we will have? Our young people will not be traveling in the seas, in the Mediterranean seas, dying. These people cannot love us more than we love ourselves. Do not be deceived. Okay, let me try to see if the second video will play better than this one, and okay, let's see what this one. Just take a listen.
The highest award given to British officials who work abroad is the Order of St. Michael and St. George. This consists of a star with a little enamelled painting, and the painting shows the angel St. Michael standing on the neck of the devil, and the devil is a black man. This image is very similar to one that we've become familiar with. A policeman kneeling on George Floyd's neck as he says, "I can't breathe." And the idea of standing or kneeling on the neck of a black man is deeply embedded in these notions of dominance, of white people over black people, the dominance of Western nations over other countries.
It's a shame that the videos are not playing very well, but I think this last one about the order of, or the honor of St. Michael's, or whatever it's called, that is given to those British people who go and do all sorts of atrocities, commit all sorts of atrocities in Africa, and they return and they give them these sort of medals. You've heard from this British journalist. This is not a conspiracy theory by some African. You've heard. Now you understand the reason why the angels are always painted in white and the devils are always painted in black. This is how centuries upon centuries, black people were conditioned to hate themselves. Because who wants to identify with negativity or failure or wickedness or evil? Nobody. So if everything that is bad, everything that is bad, everything that is evil is painted to be black, somehow, centuries over, it is stuck in our brain, it is stuck in our minds that the white people are the good people and the black people are the evil people. So all the abuse, whether you're African American, whether you are in the Caribbean, whether you are on the continent of Africa, as long as your skin is colored, the abuse that you face, even from ignorant people who are not necessarily, even in knowledge of why they dislike or they hate someone of a different color, it's because of conditioning. There are many white people who are also victims of the conditioning of their forefathers. So this picture painted here, I'm going to play that again and I'm going to fast forward that to that point where you see.
The highest award given to British officials who work abroad is the Order of St. Michael and St. George. This consists of a star with a little enamelled painting.
Now take a look.
And the painting shows the angel St. Michael standing on the neck of the devil, and the devil is a black man. This image is very similar to one that we've become familiar with. A policeman.
So you see, this is a conditioning. These are things in plain sight, hidden in plain sight. When you hear things are hidden in plain sight, this is one of them. Because someone will wear that medal talking to you in front of you, And you will never imagine the connotations of the pictures of or the icons that they use in sending messages. These are the sort of the things that they were conditioned to believe in. So how can someone who is conditioned to believe such a thing be the kinder one, the good one, simply because they have a lighter skin tone than a darker skinned African? We must understand as Africans what the game plan is. They cannot love us more than we love ourselves. No. I'll take a read. Synovia Reedley says, I get the point of it, sis. Now we are standing on our own necks because that's what happens when you become so victimized, you are so abused that you become an abuser yourself. Washington Stanley says, indirect colonialism is crumbling. Final hammer upon the nail on the casket of colonialism in Africa. Africa is arising. And then Washington Stanley did send something else earlier on that I wanted to read, but I think he says, it's always said that the worst democracy is better than military rule. However, the crop of young military officers taking over in succession is a welcome development. The people are tired of greedy old thieves. Now, this is the sentiment that is shared across the continent of Africa. If the people, let me see. Charles Oduneye says it is very difficult to free the people democratically without educating them. This is why Africa houses the most uneducated population in the world, blinding them from a clear understanding of their situation, their real problems, their real problems, their real problems, their enemies or friends. So it's very difficult to do it without the brave young man who will forcefully remove puppets or, as Starman calls them, colonial prison wardens. So yes, if 50% of Africa's population is educated, then yes, the ballot is the way, but we are far from there. So Charles is also agreeing to the fact that the ill-educated population that we have in Africa does not allow for us to have a democratically elected system of government as it stands today. So in said in different ways, but everyone is saying the same thing, applauding the military intervention or coup in Africa as the way forward. Okay? Sahid Oguntayo, may God bless African. Absolutely. So really quickly, it's a shame, Sahel, we are left alone. We were supposed to be 5 of us here having this conversation. The others are having difficulty coming on. And I do not want to carry on with the broadcast for too long. And Sahel, as a Pan-Africanist, as a young Pan-Africanist, we who are from a distance applauding your president Ruto with the sort of statements he's making publicly. How are the people in Kenya welcoming his stance on some of these issues?
Yeah, actually, I think I've never been voted, and I don't think that I fought for this. I've never been voted, and I don't think that I'll vote. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you come closer to your microphone, please?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your network has gone bad as well.
What about now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. So basically, I have never been voted, and I don't think that I'll never vote, because I think we are voting for the same system.
Oh, sad. He just dropped out. It's a network, and the other colleagues who would have joined, I believe, are all joining from Africa, so we're having network issues. However, I think we've done a bit of justice to the part where we took that long article read, painting a picture of the Nigerian problem. But in my opinion, in my opinion, bear with me a moment. So, in my opinion, it is one of those situations that we find ourselves that we must take advantage of. We must think of ourselves. We must understand that if for any reason we do respect the sovereignty of any nation, that Nigeria, ECOWAS led by Nigeria, should not invade or attack Niger. It is undemocratic. It should not be encouraged even by the Western powers, even though it favors them, because clearly these are the issues we keep having when they continue to change the rules in the middle of the game. When it suits them, they accept. When it doesn't, they use the same issues to send African leaders to the International Criminal Court, where none of their Western leaders who have committed much bigger, heinous crimes never seem to go to. The International Criminal Court is set up only to restrict, imprison African leaders that do not do the bidding of the slave masters. All right, Sayel, I know your network is bad. Quickly carry on so we can call it a day on today's broadcast.
Yeah, the network is poor. So the network is poor. So basically, but I'm trying to struggle. So you ask a point whereby you say that there's a clip that I was going around with William Ruto talking about the de-dollarization, talking about sometimes I can say the de-dollarization, but I can say this is not something new. This is something that I've been always been saying by Kagame, the president of Rwanda, has been always advocating for the Africa unity. But at the same time, these people are really funny. Kagame is talking about the Africa unity, he's talking nicely about Africa, but his action is executing something that is totally different from what he's saying. We have seen that Kagame leaders, they are the one who are fueling wars in Congo, the M23. They are well known, and I'm not afraid to say on the TV, on the Africa Rise TV. They are well known that the people who are sponsoring the wars in Congo, the tribal wars in Congo. So the same thing that is happening to William Ruto. William Ruto, he was, in fact, it is only that Tinubu speech that came into the headlines. But at the same time, William Ruto was also supporting the president of Niger. This means that if somebody is defending the president of Niger, then it means that you are as well supporting the Macron, because Macron is the Luciferic system that is oppressing the masses or the Niger people. So William Ruto as well came out. It's not only the Tinubu, but as well as the William Ruto. William Ruto should deal with Kenya first, just like the Tinubu. Because if you see, the high cost of living in Kenya is very high. The high cost of living is very high in Kenya as well. So if you are talking about the Pan-Africanism, and there's some that I've been always telling people, you're talking about Africa unity, you're talking about the liberation of Africa people, but you are not talking about something that we call class antagonism or the class struggle. Those are the same people who don't have the pay slip. They are not employed, but they are sleeping in the street. They're the people who are building this building, but they are being paid at a very low wage. But those people are not talking about the same. We are just talking about the Africa unity, but we are not talking on how we can eradicate poverty in Africa. So to come on point is that William Ruto is talking nicely about the de-dollarization, but do you have the correct avenue to de-dollarize it? Or you are just talking about the dollarization, but you don't have the roadmap? You must have the roadmap, you must have the destination, you must have the avenue. So whenever you talk about the dollarization, or you talk about the Africa unity, it must that you have something that you are doing. Let's talk about the EU. Now you can see the country. Now I must have a passport for me to go to Uganda. First of all, he must talk with Museveni. He's a great friend of Museveni. He must talk to the president of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu, so that we can just remove the East Africa passport. If somebody from Kenya to go to us the passport, the office of the migration to the passport. So those are the things that we have to talk about. He should as well declare Kenya as the passport-free state, right? So instead of talking such kind of awards, but you are not executing anything, I think William Ruto should execute at least something. The cost of living, everybody is crying in Kenya about the high cost of living, about the financial bill that he has forced to the people. He has written the court there. Now the court has passed the law. He has passed the court has upheld the financial bill that he has forced the members of parliament position so that he cannot get opposition in the National Assembly. So I can say that Ruto is just talking nicely, sweet the television. This is the thing that I have become. The talk he was very clear on he said in 100 days I lower the cost of living. But now it is double. And I'm sure that Kenyans are watching. The high cost of living is double in Kenya compared to the last regime. I'm talking something that it is not something that it is really into practice. The cost of living is very high. Yet let's price of sugar. Sugar is very you want to buy a 2 kg of sugar, it is 510. It is around 1,500 naira Kenya shilling. So basically, we have to talk on something that we have to execute. We go sugar in Kenya. Then why don't we buy sugar at the high price? We grow the maize in Kenya. Why are we buying the maize at a very high price? That is very ridiculous. So I think Ruto can do, instead of having a sweet talk, he should execute what he has promised during it. And that's the people also be brainwashed. Because these politicians, they know how to talk to them, know how to talk with the people. They know how to talk nicely. But in the real sense, they are doing a different thing. There are a lot of things that this politician like William Ruto has just promised Kenya, but he has not done. He has just opened the office of the spouse, office of the prime minister, the spouse of the prime minister in Kenya. Imagine there's such kind of office in Kenya. There is also an unconstitutional office in Kenya that is called the office of the prime minister. It's unconstitutional. The point doesn't exist in any in Kenya constitution. Again, you added 57 CSS. The last regime had around 20, had 23 CSS.
Oh, not again. Washington Stanley says Nigeria that guarantee her citizens safety in villages, towns, seaways, and highways is threatening. Okay, I think it means Nigeria that cannot guarantee. Nigeria that cannot guarantee her citizens safety in villages, towns, and seaways and highways is threatening to invade another nation, even though the people are happy with the event unfolding within their country. Absolutely my point. This is something that the people are in support of. You can see the people standing together, shoulder to shoulder with their military. The people are not crying. Why are you crying more than a bereaved? It doesn't make sense. When Nigeria cried out, the people of Nigeria cried out in 2021 with the massacre of the young people at Lekki Toll Gate. The entire world turned blind eye like nothing ever happened. They took the side of the story or interpretation of whatever happened from the Nigerian government. They didn't listen to the people, but the people were there on the streets. They were there in the diaspora. They spoke up. They held up pictures. I was one of them. The international community turned a blind eye. So why are they so concerned now when the people of Niger are quite happy with the happenings and unfoldings in their country politically? Why should ECOWAS even think for a moment, if not the fact that they are also scared of what might happen in their own countries because they know how illegitimate the positions they occupy is, especially at least for Bola Ahmed Tinubu, president of Nigeria. Lance Bimon says, thank you for this significant share, Susan. It is so vital that we not allow our adversaries to gain control of the narrative. Absolutely. Thank goodness we have these platforms to use and we will use it very well. It is because of these platforms that some of the unfoldings are happening. Because as small as a platform is, as insignificant as you might think that your platform is, it is making a difference. Little drops of water make a mighty ocean, as they say. Even if 10 people, 20 people, 30 people, 100 people listen from your platform, that's 100 people who are going to be educated, who will re-educate at least one to each, which will multiply in 100-fold. That is how we got to this point. That is how the awakening happened, that even the leaders on the continent began to vocalize and say things that sound like things that we say on social media. Things that were said during the Africa-Europe summit or whatever it was termed. They were voicing things. President of South Africa, President of Kenya. These people were voicing things that sounded like things that we made noise about, we talked about, we sang about on social media. They began to sound like the people. In reality, whether or not they have the capacity or the willingness to carry on to take steps, practical steps that will lead their countries to those places that they have openly talked about. We don't know, just like Sayel was talking about. President Ruto is talking about de-dollarization of that zone. However, he's not in support of Niger's, what's happening in Niger. What are the blueprints or the plan on how to get East Africa or South Africa or that region to using their local currency in trading with each other efficiently? Okay, when the Francophone countries are their monies are pegged to whatever that is going on in the central bank of France, and they have no control on the strength of their currency or their legal tender. And ECOWAS was supposed to come up with a currency for the entire West Africa called the ECO. We haven't seen the daylight of it because of France's interference with the happenings. These are things that democratically, I believe it's not achievable because the democratically elected government in all of these countries are stooges of the West. And this is the reason why people who would ordinarily frown at coups or military interventions in a democracy are applauding it. Because there is little to nothing democracy or democratically elected government in Africa have been able to positively, there is no positive impact on the lives of the people. The economy of the nations are dwindling, nosediving on a daily basis. We're given a democracy in paper. In practice, there is no democracy. In practice, the elections that are held in all these different countries, the people vote for a certain person and someone else foists somebody else and manipulates the results, and the international community are mute on it because they don't care. What they care about is, will this person listen and do as we say, as we tell them? Are they going to favor us? Are they going to turn a blind eye whilst we take away the uranium of the countries? Whilst we cut away with the gold found in those countries? whilst we take away the petroleum resources from those countries, whilst we make sure that their refineries never work, so that they export this crude to us, we refine it and we sell it back to them, weakening their local currencies. That's all they care about. They don't care what the people want. They don't care what the voices of the people are saying. They say, after all, the voice of the people is the voice of God. How do they say it in Latin? Voice populi, voice Dei, something like that. The people have been talking. It means God has been speaking, but the devil in this case is not black. They make sure that the voice of the people is muffled. They make sure that the reality that the people have to deal with is a reality of austerity, poverty, ill-educated society, because for all they care about, the more they talk about education, but they don't want education for the large population of the African nations. Why? Because when we get educated, we understand what is going on. We read, we communicate, we understand conversations, we have dialogues, and we understand ourselves. We do not need somebody else to do a translation where meanings are lost during translations, or somebody else is saying what they think the people in the villages should hear. Okay? So this battle is going to be won. It's not going to be won overnight, and it's not going to be won on a platter. There will be a giving and a taking. And just so you know, you are black, you are proud. There are different kinds of blackness. We have different tones of blackness. We are beautiful. We are God. Just know that. Okay? We are angels. We are all that the Almighty is. We have His essence. Black is beautiful. Black is God. Know that. Not the picture painted as a white angel trampling on the neck of a black devil. Get that picture out of your mind. Get those ideas out of your mind and understand how superior you are. All right. I did have 4 guests scheduled today. They all had issues with their connections. They were not able to stay on the broadcast. However, I do not think that we've had a wasted day. Thank goodness. However little, Sael was able to stay with us and gave a little contribution from his part. And Lance Beeman says, before this broadcast ends, please, everyone who hasn't already done so, hit the like button so that this channel can improve its position in the algorithm. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lance Beeman. Exactly. These are the sort of channels that should be supported. We do great work. We should be able to get the sort of support from the kind of community that is our demography, which is Black people on the continent and in the diaspora all around the world. Like, follow, subscribe if you haven't done so. And if you do subscribe, remember to press the bell button. Encourage us to come on more often as we would like. By your follow, your likes, subscribing, you will encourage us to keep coming and bring in the sort of content and resources that will add value to your life. So I know you're really, thank you so much. Washington Stanley, product of electoral coup, is now a saint fighting for democracy. Interesting movie. Oh, yes. You're referring to Bola Ahmed Tinubu of Nigeria. He's a product of electoral coup. Absolutely. Absolutely. He's only fighting for himself, his position. Yes, believe it or not, the same way the United States of America and France did not see the coup coming in Niger. It is possible anywhere on the continent. That's all I have to say. Yes, good day, good night, all morning, everyone. Take care. And you, Lance Bimon, Have a wonderful rest of your day. This is the much we can take for today. And I do hope that I'm able to come as often as I'd like so that we can shed more light on more happenings and educate ourselves in the process. Charles Odine, in Europe, no child is left behind, and education is compulsory, and it's against the law not to be in school. How many times have you ever heard the Western media make it a duty to drum this to the prison wardens they put in place? Absolutely. How many times do they drum it to the ears of those stooges they install on the seats in Africa as presidents to say that it is compulsory to educate the children? No, they don't do that. They don't, because it's part of the tool they use in holding us back. All right. Thank you so much. And I'll see you again maybe tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. In the course of the week, before the weekend, we'll try to see as much as we can come on. Like, follow, subscribe, and press the bell button once you've done so. I love you all. Do take care of yourself. My name is Susan West. See you next time. Bye bye.